It is another episode of Back Porch Sports. He's Ronnie Sanders. I'm Scott Hamilton. For the next 60 minutes, we are going to take a lap around the Southeastern Conference, talk about the news and notable notes happening in the greatest conference in all of college sports. Ronnie, how you doing today?
I'm great. Good to be with you, Scott.
Ronnie, do you know that we are just over 100 days away from the start of college football? I'm absolutely. That's a little over 3 months, brother.
Hard to believe. Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, well, speaking of having fun, normally this is the downtime. It's that period where we're focusing maybe on baseball, still reconciling basketball, and looking forward to football. There's not a whole lot of news going on, but that hasn't been the case this week. We're getting some notable news nuggets. Ronnie, we've got some early kickoff times for Southeastern Conference games and some TV time slots. I want to get your thoughts on these. So, okay, September 1st, Labor Day weekend, by the way. East Carolina at Alabama, noon, ABC. That's a good way to kick off the season. Alabama playing a noon game on Saturday, Labor Day.
Yeah, I mean it's a great way to kick off the Labor Day weekend with Alabama. I mean, I don't expect it to be much of a game. If it is, then Alabama's got bigger problems.
I agree with that. ECU actually had a pretty good year last year.
They did,
but I've got high hopes for Alabama going into this year 3 of Kalen DeBoer, and we'll chop it up closer we get to the season. I think a lot of it's going to him. How's the running game? Is it going to be existent this year? Is non-existent last year? What's going to happen at the quarterback situation? But we'll get into the minutia of that at another time. Here's the other one, Ronnie, on that same day, and this one's a little closer to home for you. Baylor versus Auburn. That's taking place in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. That's a 3:30 kickoff Eastern time on ABC. I like it. And I think there's a lot at stake here. First of all, the debut of Alex Golesh, but also Baylor's got a lot to prove. That coach they got there, he got a year reprieve. We'll put it that way. Dave Aranda, will he start this year off with a bang or not? What are you hearing about this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, well, Auburn is getting a lot of money for NIL, which is why they're doing the game. Auburn fans are not at all happy about it. This is a year where typically in a year where you have Auburn typically has no less than 7 home games a year. And so this year there's 6. And Auburn had a hard time getting other SEC programs to come to Jordan-Hare and play, and including the Final Brick, as it's called, in 1989 with Alabama. And so the athletic director moved the game. And, fans younger than me even are upset about it. Now, they're glad to have the money for NIL, but at the same point in time, they understand how difficult it was to get some of those teams to come play in Auburn. And so it's but that being said, Auburn will have a huge home crowd advantage.
Yeah.
And, I think it's a huge game for Dave Aranda. It's a big game for Alex Golesh because look at the rest of the schedule. I mean, I think in the first month of the season, you've got LSU and Florida.
Well, and if you can get a non-conference Power 4 opponent, a win over one of those under your belt out of the gate, that gives you a whole lot of confidence. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is this the Chick-fil-A Kickoff Game? Yes, I think it is. Well, I attended that last year. South Carolina played Virginia Tech, which was really a kind of odd dynamic considering Shane Beamer had played at Virginia Tech. He had been an assistant at Virginia Tech. And, oh, by the way, there's a statue of his dad outside Lane Stadium. And South Carolina won that game and really was kind of what was expected. They had a lot of expectations going into last season. Didn't work out. But I like the kickoffs in Atlanta, and I'm cool with these early season non-conference games. And kind of to your point, as far as Auburn fans, I get being sideways, not having these kinds of games coming into Jordan-Hare, but come on, man. It's Atlanta. As you said, also, they're going to have a good home field advantage, but they're also going to have that window, that 3:30 ABC window on that first Saturday. There's a lot of collateral in that. There's value in that for a lot of reasons, marketing, recruiting, you name it. I think they need to look big picture.
Well, I think that obviously the athletic director made the deal for all those reasons. Now he came from Mississippi State. He's not from Auburn. And Alex Golesh is certainly not from Auburn.
Ain't from around here.
Yeah, I think they're having a hard time maybe wrapping their heads around it. But again, I'm not sure that the younger generation gets it as much as those who remember Alabama showing up down there for the first time.
Here's the next one later that night. Might be some attention on this game. Clemson at LSU, 7:30 Eastern, ABC.
You think anybody be interested in that?
I'll tell you who is interested in it. I'll go ahead and jump ahead. That's College GameDay. It's going to be their opening site, the Lane Bowl. And I was at this game last year. I was at this one also. It was LSU at Clemson. It was a top 10 matchup. Wow. If you would have told me that night that Clemson would win only 7 games and have 9 of those guys get drafted to go to the NFL, that Brian Kelly would be gone before Halloween, that Cade Klubnik would end up being a low draft pick to the Jets. And I don't even know where Nussmeier went. I mean, both those guys are being tossed around as Heisman candidates. If you would have told me that night all of that would have manifested, I would have asked you, what the hell are you smoking? What the hell are you drinking?
Well, I would have said the same thing, but I also said the same thing, 10 years ago, but about another topic, but I will leave that alone.
Yeah, it's given the climate of the world, it's better we skip that one. But I just find it fascinating, the direction and trajectory of those two programs, man. And it further reinforces what we talked about a couple of weeks ago, Ronnie, that you just don't know. You just don't know anymore.
You don't know. And as much turnover as there is on rosters throughout the country, you have no idea what you're getting. And these kids, they've got to have time to gel. And, the football team that lines up in September is not the same football team that's going to line up in December. And it's just, it's a completely different animal. And so I think it's a big game for Lane Kiffin. What if he goes down there and pees down his leg, and it's a big game for Dabo.
Huge.
The Boo Birds are going to be out early. If they drop one at LSU, it's going to get real negative real quick on him.
They started off 1-2 last year. They lost to LSU. They barely beat Troy, and then they lost at Georgia Tech. And that was to be the team that validated everything Dabo has screamed and preached and yelled about for years, about how to be a developmental program and not work the portal and this, that, and the other. And it didn't work. It didn't work. They ended up losing the bowl game. I think it was the Pinstripe Bowl to a Penn State team that had also fired its coach. Then he dips his toes into the portal this year and gets burned when he accuses Ole Miss of tampering with Luke Farrelly, the linebacker out of Cal. Dabo needs a win. Dabo needs more than a win. Dabo needs a return to the playoff. Otherwise, I can see things changing there really quick because people are not happy. But we'll chop all that up another time as well. Here's the last game I want to go over that weekend, that opening weekend. Louisville versus Ole Miss in Nashville. Once more, 7:30 Eastern time kickoff on ABC. Louisville's a tough out, brother. Jeff Brom's done a fantastic job with that team. He's from Louisville, played at Louisville. He gets it. Pete Golding. I think we're going to see how Pete Golding really is as a head coach pretty quick because, yeah, they did pretty good in the playoff after he was thrown into the fire with the whole Lane Kiffin mess. But being in that position emotionally, emotions can take you a long way. What's he do when he's had a whole year to let those emotions subside and the reality that he's the man, he's the head coach sink in? How does he respond? How does the team respond?
Well, and that's the thing. And how many new players are there? And how do they buy in to him? And he is, say what you want to about Lane Kiffin, but he made Ole Miss kind of a cool, sexy place for a change.
Relevant.
Yeah. Whereas before it was thought of as, I don't know, racist.
We'll touch on that in a minute.
but I think that he made Ole Miss relevant, and he's irrelevant again. It's been a long time, like the 60s. But they won 10 games, 3 out of the last 4 years, something like that. He did a great job in the portal, did a terrific job, won a bunch of games. And you can't blame him for wanting to go take a better job at LSU. You can certainly handle it. You can certainly blame him for some of the things the way he's handled situations over the years.
Well, and we're going to get into Lane Kiffin later in the program because we've both got thoughts on it, and I've got thoughts on that Vanity Fair article that dropped earlier in the week. That guy, he just never learns. But I digress. Back to the schedule. College GameDay going to be Clemson at LSU. Week two's been revealed. Ohio State at Texas, which I think is kind of a no-brainer, and it's a rematch from last year. Here's my thought on that. It's a 7:30 game. It's on ABC. Good for the fans of Ohio State. That's all I'll say. I will throw them a bone and say good for them, because there are actually times I feel bad for the fans of the Big Ten, because their best games are usually relegated to noon. And in the SEC, that usually means you're playing an FCS school or you're just god awful.
There's no question. I really feel I'm the same way, Scott. I mean, if you play in the Southeastern Conference, you want one of those primetime games. You want the 3:30 slot. A lot of these fans they much prefer a night game, because you can tailgate all day. I'll say get drunk all day. But depending on your preference. Nowadays, maybe you're smoking weed. But either way, I just think that the noon kickoff just kind of ruins the. I was up at the game at Ohio State a couple years ago now, and it was a noon kick, and it's just not the same as a later in the day.
Well, it's all because of TV, obviously, and Fox, for whatever reason, thinks propping things up at 12 o'clock is awesome. Like that makes it just such a special event. It's actually detrimental to some of the teams. And I'll use Penn State as an example. I mean, the biggest thing Penn State has going for it outside of the field is when it has those whiteout games, which are cool as crap. But, they don't pop as much at 12 o'clock in the sunshine as it does at night at Happy Valley. So it's bad on Fox. And then what if your best game is by happenstance turns out to be arbitrarily, let's say UCLA at Washington? Are they going to play it at noon up in Seattle? Honestly.
Right.
So it's the networks pulling the strings and just ruining one of the best parts of college football. One more thing here, Ronnie, before we hit the break, and I want to circle back to College GameDay. They've only released the first two stops, okay? But I got a feeling where week 3, where game day will be. LSU's got to go to Oxford.
You think they might be at Oxford?
You feel good about that?
I feel pretty good about that.
Well, I tell you what, you could actually buy stock on if that's going to happen or not. We're going to help you out. If you want to explore the prediction markets, Kalshi is giving you a running go. Visit kalshi.com/blitz. You'll get a $20 head start to begin your journey in the prediction markets. That's kalshi.com/blitz. Hey, we've got Kentucky coach Will Stein joining us later in the show. We're going to find out what he's doing to adapt to being a head coach in the Southeastern Conference and what he's learned at his previous stops that he's taking with him to Lexington to try to elevate the Kentucky program. Kentucky coach Will Stein coming aboard in about 30 minutes. He's Ronnie Sanders. I'm Scott Hamilton. It's Back Porch Sports, presented by Duck Club Bourbon.
Some guys just look like they know where the good stories are. And this guy's kind of a big deal. Welcome to Back Porch Sports, sponsored by Duck Club Bourbon.
Welcome back. It's Back Porch Sports, presented by Duck Club Bourbon. We've got Kentucky coach Will Stein coming aboard in a few minutes. See how he's adapting to life, not only as a head coach, but life as a head coach in the SEC, in an SEC that's about to have a 9-game conference schedule for the first time in its storied history. We'll see how Will Stein is adapting. But first, Ronnie, I've got a couple of topics here I want us to go over. And when I talk about talking season, we hear talking season. Don't we usually think it's media day, right? When everybody gets together for that 2 or 3 day kumbaya session, coaches and media, and go over and try to preview the season. Isn't that normally talking season?
Yes, usually.
Well, usually, but not right now, Ronnie Sanders. There's been some barking. And there's been some chirping. First, I want to go over this. I want to get your thoughts on this. The Vanity Fair had a profile of Lane Kiffin in its most recent issue. The guy, he has now started putting his foot in his mouth in the pages of Vanity Fair. It's not just sports pages and sports websites now. I have so much shock, and yet I'm not shocked by the thing that Lane Kiffin said, the things he said in this. First of all, let's get some bare facts. He replayed the hits, blamed the schedule on why he had to leave Ole Miss the way he did right before the playoffs started, and then tried to say they shouldn't be mad at me. They should be grateful. And I'm paraphrasing only slightly. They should be paraphrasing for what he did for the university. All right. I get it. But here's the one that really got me, Ronnie. Kiffin told Vanity Fair that families of recruits often told him, and I'm quoting verbatim from the article now, "Hey, coach, we really like you, but my grandparents aren't letting me move to Oxford, Mississippi." He claimed that was not an issue in Baton Rouge, and the implication has to do with segregation and race. Oh, my Lord, Ronnie, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there might be some truth in the stigma that we talked about earlier in the show. I think I did a little bit earlier. I think there probably is some stigma there, but I don't think if you're in his position, you can go around saying that. I've lived in Baton Rouge. I worked at LSU. It's a great place. It's a better job than Ole Miss, but Ole Miss gave him an opportunity, and they gave him NIL money, and they gave him facilities, and they got him back in the Southeastern Conference. He was at FAU. And they committed, and good for them and good for him. But let's not be so. I don't know. Maybe he needs to be more grateful.
That's a really good way to put it. A couple of things. One, he's been on record, even as recently as last year at SEC Media Day, talking about how awesome Oxford was, how great it was, what a wonderful place it is. Shangri-La is the way he made it sound like. And then in that documentary that ESPN pushed out there, again, which ended up having so many falsehoods in it, I don't know if we have enough time in this program to go over them all, but he basically said something along the lines of, I needed Oxford more than Oxford needed me. And that's just this wonderful place. And by all accounts, that's what he told recruits. And now he's flipping the script, trying to make them look like it was a bad situation. Here's my next thought. And I'm sorry, this fired me up. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ronnie Sanders. Was he or was he not the highest paid state employee in Mississippi? I believe he was, correct?
I believe he was.
So that gives him arguably the loudest megaphone in the state. Wouldn't you agree?
And one of the loudest in the conference.
One of the loudest in the conference. So if this was truly an issue, and if he truly felt this way, if he has a conscience and it was telling him things, why didn't he actually speak up? Why didn't he try to say something? Hey, man, you know what? I love it here, but there's some issues. I love it here, but I got recruits telling me they can't come here. And look, this ain't about football. This is about doing what's right. He never did any of that. He never even mentioned, he never went down that road. He didn't say anything until after he left, allegedly being run out of town, which I do believe the state troopers of Mississippi said was a falsehood, chasing him to the airport. He hasn't changed his spots. He's just changed the color. They're purple and gold now instead of powder blue and red.
That's it. He's the same guy. I mean, look, I was talking to Paul Feinbaum. It was a private conversation, but he doesn't say much off the air off the air that he doesn't say on the air. He's the same guy that he's the same guy he's been. All the reputation rehab and all this stuff he did, the ESPN special like that you discussed. He's the same guy, and so maybe it'll work for me at LSU, but maybe it won't. And if it doesn't, and you got a $30 million roster, and they paid him all this money after they paid Brian Kelly not to coach. And I think Brian Kelly averaged 9 wins a season. Let's not forget, people thought, well, Brian Kelly failed. Well, okay. Tough conference.
That's putting it mildly. Here's a guy who I think he was 31 years old when he became the head coach of the Raiders. And that was a renegade move by a renegade owner, Al Davis. He saw some of himself in Lane Kiffin. Then it went so sideways that he not only washed his hands of Lane Kiffin, he had a PowerPoint presentation for about 45 minutes or an hour going over the awfulness of Lane Kiffin. Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong. He penned a letter to the University of Tennessee saying, you should not hire this guy. Al Davis has no connection to Knoxville or UT to my knowledge, okay? And then he leaves there. Knoxville almost burning. I mean, there were fires set outside the football facility the night that he slipped out of town, trying to have a press conference to explain his way, which you never have. When a coach is leaving, they never have a going away presser because of that. Goes to USC, gets fired on the tarmac, goes into the Saban School of Wayward Coaches, gets scrubbed, clean, sanitized, baptized, man. And then gets the FAU job, sticks around to be the offensive coordinator, but Saban fires him after the semifinal because he's running plays against Washington that they hadn't practiced. Ronnie, they had like 2 weeks to prepare for that game. If you are running plays that you had not practiced, that cake wasn't going to bake with Saban. And then he goes to FAU and he's kind of low profile. And he's following the Saban program and all that, and he gets the Ole Miss job. And it worked out fabulously. He had the image. Look, at the end of the day, he's the same dude. He's just skinnier. Paul's right.
And look, and I think he's clean, which we can talk about all the off the field stuff. Probably not on the air, but there's plenty there. And so, like I say, I think he's cleaned his life up in that sense, and he's got his family's approval. He took the Auburn job and then backed out, so it's not like he hasn't flirted before. Look, Ole Miss, I think, give Ole Miss credit. They went out and they got a big name coach, and they paid him to keep him. And they stepped up in NIL and they did the things they needed to do. But at the end of the day, it's still Ole Miss.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying. And at the end of the day, he's still Lane Kiffin. And don't forget the Kiffin gang, the ex-wife and I think the brother. They were traveling around. They were going to they also went to Florida. He talked to Florida too, strung them along.
In the middle of the season.
In the middle of the season. Thank you. And he's tried to walk back. Go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier, he talked about the schedule, the season. So, look, here's the thing. That's always been an issue. And so, Jeff Bauer, for example, turned down the Georgia job because he wanted to coach Southern Miss in the bowl game. And that's just one example. That happens all the time. If you want to take a job, fine. And he did. But don't be surprised when there's blowback when you don't do things the right way. And so I had a coach put it to me this way. Look, sometimes there's a perfect job for you, the perfect job, but it's not the perfect time. And so, sometimes your dream job you may have to pass it up. If you've got a football team that's going into the playoff with a chance to win a national championship, you gonna walk away and take another job? Now maybe he didn't think they were good enough to win a national championship, but if you're in the dance and you played through the Southeastern Conference, maybe you got a chance to win it. I don't think I'll walk out the door. That's me.
Well,
now I'm not saying at some point you don't walk out the door. I'm not saying that, I'm not saying that Ole Miss is a better job than LSU. Don't get me wrong. LSU is a much better job than Ole Miss, and arguably LSU's biggest rival.
Oh yeah. All I say is this: 3 or 4 things. One, we had a fella on Back Porch Sports with us last week who, correct me if I'm wrong, coached his team in the college football playoff after taking another job in Summerall. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. We have an interview coming up on the other side of this section where
he was coming from an AAC school.
You still had to stack your roster. The portal was open. You still had to build your roster.
You still did, but Ole Miss didn't let him stay. And it was in the same conference.
And I've said it before, Keith Carter did the right thing by not letting maybe they would have worked with him if he'd have given him an answer, but he kept jacking him around. Maybe if Lane Kiffin had said, Keith, I think I'm going to take this job. Okay, but I want to stay. What can we do to make this work? I think Keith Carter would have worked with him, but it was the flakiness. 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I don't know, Lane. He loves the drama. He loves the attention. Now, in his defense, he has tried to walk back the Vanity Fair comments slightly.
He didn't have much choice.
those comments were, quote, not intended to be a calculated attack, but rather a reflection of a longstanding narratives in recruiting. Okay, I get it. Okay. But to your point, he had no choice. He stepped in it, and it's his modus operandi. He crossed the line with that. Some things you can get away with, but when you start getting into situations like this, that's even Joey Freshwater can't smile and smirk his way out of that and say, oh, it's just me being me.
I off the field stuff, Scott.
Well, I can't wait to discuss that during the break. But on the other side, Will Stein, head coach at the University of Kentucky. He's one of those new coaches in the SEC. He's going to come aboard the Duncan Williams Management Hotline. We're going to see how things are developing in Lexington for a native Kentuckian who's got his first head coaching job at the school he grew up adoring. We got Will Stein joining us on the other side. He's Ronnie Sanders. I'm Scott Hamilton. It's Back Porch Sports presented by Duck Club Bourbon.
From the blind to the back porch, some traditions are built to be shared. Duck Club Bourbon, real heritage, no gimmicks. Proud sponsor of Back Porch Sports.
Welcome back, everybody, to Back Porch Sports. We're now joined on the Duncan Williams Hotline by Kentucky coach Will Stein. Coach, it's good to be with you.
Good to be with you, Ronnie. Thanks for having me on. Excited to talk.
Absolutely. So you go from a program like Oregon with resources like that, which is good or bad depending on which is always labeled a basketball school, which can be good or bad. Is growing up in Kentucky, having knowledge of the culture, might be what separated you from the other candidates?
I don't know. I think it's all about fit, right? I mean, I don't think it's about where you're from. I mean, there's a lot of money involved and a lot of factors that are involved in college football. So I think it was just a great fit for me, my family. And I think it's a bonus that I'm from here. Obviously, knowing the landscape of Kentucky football, being a part of this school growing up as a fan, and my dad being a part of this school, my mom, both of them, this is their alma mater. But I think that only goes so far. Like, I think the nostalgia, the excitement only goes so far, and it's about fit. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here and excited about what we're building.
Now, you played at Louisville. How does it work being the head coach at Kentucky?
Yeah, I mean, I had 7 great years there. I really did, as a player and as a coach. And but I grew up a diehard Kentucky fan. Like I said, both my parents went here. Grew up going to Commonwealth Stadium every single Saturday to watch the Cats play. Grew up going to Rupp Arena on Tuesday and Thursday nights to watch the Cats play, and was a part of Kentucky football and basketball my entire life up until I decided to go to Louisville as an 18-year-old senior from Louisville. So it's really surreal to be back in this chair, to be here and to be a part of this. But yeah, I mean, I don't shy away from the fact that I went to Louisville. I think it's everything works out for a reason. I went there. We won a lot of games and ended up getting an opportunity to go to Texas with Coach Strong, and then met Jeff Traylor there. And then Jeff got me to UTSA, and then from UTSA went to Oregon. Now I'm back here in my home state at a place that I love at the University of Kentucky. So it all works out.
You've been around some great guys, great mentors. Talk a little bit about what they meant to you and how it plays into your style as a head coach.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the product of great coaching. From the time I was a little league player to high school at Trinity High School in Louisville, Kentucky, with Bob Beatty as my head coach, who's one of the legends of Kentucky high school football. And then went to Louisville and played for Steve Cragthorpe, played for Coach Strong, and along the way I had 4 different coordinators, which I thought was bad as a player. But looking back now as a coach, I had Jeff Brom as a coordinator, Matt Wells as a coordinator, Mike Groh, Sean Watson. So I was around some elite football coaches, and then went with or stayed around with Coach Petrino at Louisville for a year, worked with him, and then went to Texas with Coach Strong and met a bunch of guys there, and then stayed on with Tom Herman at Texas and met a whole new group of guys. And then I went to Lake Travis with Hank Carter. I had 2 great years with him, and then back to college ball with Jeff Traylor, and then to Oregon with Dan Lanning. So been very lucky, been very blessed, and each have had their own personality and way to do things. And just like I am here, I'm not just a rinse, repeat, and copy paste type person. going to make this my own, but taking some stuff along the way from each of those guys.
So your first time head coach in the SEC, and maybe you're hesitant at this point in your career to voice an opinion on the college football playoff and scheduling. What are your thoughts on it? What's the ideal size of the playoff?
I'm not opposed to expansion. I think whenever you can add more people to the pod, it just creates more excitement for multiple fan bases. I think the people that don't want it, they've seen the people that have won it every single year, but to me that makes the Louisville or the Kentucky Louisville game even more exciting at the end of the year, right? Because both teams could be fighting for a playoff spot. So I'm all about 16. If we get to 24, I love it. As people say it's going to make the product worse. I don't understand that logic at all. I think it makes other games throughout the country even more exciting because there's more on the line for those fan bases. So I think it's going to declare a true champion. I think we can get to 16 soon. I think that's awesome. And then 24, I'm all about it. So I love it. I think the biggest thing is getting the schedule right. When we start, when we end the season, so the portal window lines up, correctly compared to what I just dealt with coaching in the college football playoff and dealing with with transfer portal at the same time. I think that's the problem.
So, as a first-time SEC coach, you may feel like you're thrown in the deep end of the ocean instead of the deep end of the pool. How do you feel like you got 9 SEC games. You open with Alabama, I believe.
Yeah, have you seen everybody else's schedule in the SEC? Yeah, it's the SEC. It's the closest thing to the NFL. So it's all relative. I think I'd rather see what our strength of schedule is like at the end of the year. They all talk about it at the beginning, but it's part of it, man. You sign up for this league, you better have some thick skin and be ready to go to work because that's what it is. So I don't shy away from competition. I invite it. I'm excited about it. I'm excited about the opportunity to go to some historic places in this league and for our team, for the teams in the league to come here to Kroger Field.
Talk a little bit about analytics. Kentucky's a school that seems to be leaning into analytics. Was there a proprietary system or was that a selling point in the interview process or how did that work?
Like analytics in terms of like football, like decision-making?
Yes.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's just Kentucky. I think it's the entire college football system. I think everybody's really using CAI now. If you're not, I think you're behind the times. We used it at Oregon. We used it at Texas. It's been around now for multiple years. About everybody in the NFL uses analytics. So I think it's just another tool that you can have to go put the best product on the field forward. There's obviously still a human element to football, but it's like sitting at the blackjack table and asking the dealer, hey, what's the book say? That's all it really is in terms of fourth down goes and timeout usage. And if you lean on that 100%, I've seen that be an issue. If you don't lean on it at all, I've seen it be an issue. But we're going to use analytics just like I did at Oregon with Coach Lanning and excited about the opportunity to work with CAI again.
So in 8 months, how will you determine if 2026 has been a success?
Shoot, man, I really try to be where my feet are right now. I'm honestly working on fall camp schedule right now. I just got my OTAs for the summer set. We're recruiting at a really good rate right now. We are got another commitment today. It's Monday. So excited about that. And I know it's cliche, but it's true. If I'm worried about the end of the year, then I'm not going to be worried about Youngstown State week 1, September 5th. So the goal is to win every game. If that's the question that you're asking me, the goal is to win every single game. And if that's not your goal, then don't coach football, don't be in the SEC, and go be a loser somewhere else in life. But don't do it here.
Coach, I really appreciate you being with us.
Thanks, Ron. I appreciate you having me too.
Thank you.
All right. Go Cats.
Thanks to Coach Stein for joining us, and we'll be back on Back Porch Sports.
Making a final lap this episode of Back Porch Sports presented by Duck Club Bourbon. Want to thank Kentucky coach Will Stein for hopping aboard the Duncan Williams Asset Management hotline. It's an absolutely captivating interview with Coach Stein, one of the newbies I've got some takeaways, Ronnie, but before I get into my list, what was the number one thing that you extracted from your chat with Will Stein?
Yeah, I knew he had been around some really good coaches. I don't think I realized he'd been around that many, and that he's able to pull from that many places. And you referenced it earlier. He grew up a huge Kentucky fan, played at Louisville.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure how that works in Alabama, but I think it probably works. In football in Kentucky is, but
yeah.
But look, he grew up a Kentucky fan. Diehard Kentucky fan. I was really impressed with him. I think he's got a shot to do some good things there. But look, Mark Stoops won games there. Mark Stoops won 10 games a few times. So
yeah,
they got enough money to be competitive in certain years.
I think that his deal will be better. First of all, they needed a change. Everywhere goes stale after a certain number of years. Once you get around that 9-10 year mark, it's might as well start looking for the door, unless your name is Nick Saban.
Yeah, it's like Mike Brown said. He said, every year, if you're in a job 10 years, you lose about 10% of support every year. So by the time you get to year 10, they're ready for you.
You're
to
done.
leave. And then he hung on to Texas for what? Till they finally had to drag him out of there with horses.
Well, a couple of things, and you mentioned it, and this was at the top of my list from takeaways. He talked about all the things he learned from the coaches that he had worked for and that he had worked with, Charlie Strong, Jeff Traylor, guys like that. So I think there's real value in there. You find the pieces that have made different guys successful, and you grab the ones that work for you, and hopefully they make you successful. So that's good on that one. I also agree that he said that the schedule needs to be tightened up. And we talked about it earlier, the schedule with regards to the transfer portal, that needs to be adjusted. And I also thought this was interesting. You asked him what his expectations were for Kentucky, and he said he was concentrating on where his feet are right now. That's the most prudent answer you can give. That's coach speak if there ever was coach speak.
It's Nick Saban speak. It's do what it takes right now. That if you don't do the small things right now, then the big things do the small things. And big things take care of themselves.
Absolutely. I agree with 100%. He did stumble, as you mentioned. He grew up a Kentucky fan, but he played at Louisville, and he was talking about the benefits of an expanded playoff. And he said that the Louisville UK game would mean more. And then he quickly corrected himself and changed it to UK Louisville game. So he's Freudian slip on his part. I did disagree with him in this regard. And you and I really do want your opinion on this. He had issue with the contention that an expanded playoff would worsen the product, and said instead that it would provide the opportunity to declare a true champion. And I was paraphrasing a couple of different answers there. I disagree. I think once you get over the 16-team mark, you have watered down the product exponentially. You have marginalized the regular season to the point where, you have some games that matter in November, but you have some teams that also have the luxury of coasting in November, or perhaps thinking of shutting it down in order to avoid injury. And if you put teams in the playoff that have 4 losses, how can you say they are the true champion? This isn't like the NFL where you can have 8 losses and win the Super Bowl. The beauty of college football is that it's a marathon, and you have to win the regular season because every week matters. You can't just coast through it and hope to make a run late and get a wild card. It doesn't work like that. And I think if you pack it with 24 teams, why don't you just go ahead and put everybody in? Why don't you just go ahead and why have a regular season at all? I think and work with me on this, it's counterintuitive, but I think there's actual value in having good teams not in the playoff. It shows the depth of the sport and how good the field actually is.
Well, how about getting the right teams in?
That's number one.
The 2 Power 6 schools that were in last year. I mean, look, great years. They had no business being in the playoff.
Yeah, I think there's a spot for them there in some regard. I don't know how. I'm not smart enough to figure that out. But I agree. Notre Dame should have been in for one of James Madison. I wouldn't have had a problem with that. I know the ACC certainly would have had a problem with it. And oh, by the way, perfect segue, professional segue. The ACC unanimously agreeing this week to a 24-team playoff. That's what the Big Ten wants, a 24-team playoff. The Big 12 is also behind it. And, oh, by the way, Notre Dame. Why? Jim Phillips, the commissioner of the ACC, said it himself. 24 means more access. Why access? Win the regular season and earn your access.
Well, look, I think that historically, back to Will Stein, he's at Kentucky.
Yeah.
Of course, he wants 24 teams, and he should. He's at Kentucky. So it's going to be it's hard to get. I mean, Vandy did it, but how and Vandy didn't make the playoff this year. But how often is it that Kentucky and Vanderbilt are going to be able to win 10 games and get in the playoff? I mean, Vandy won 10 games and didn't even get in the playoff.
I agree. And circling back to Will Stein, he is exactly what they need because it's been uninspiring football. Stoops won some games, but it was uninspiring, man. When you got Lynn Bowden playing quarterback and throwing for 40 yards a game or something ridiculous, it's hard to be excited for that, especially a school that adores basketball as much as it does and putting up points and all that. But back to the
getting the offense fixed there. The offense seemed to always be an issue there.
Well, but they were rotating through offensive coordinators every year too. And if I'm an athlete and I have other opportunities and I'm a guy who can go out and play wideout or quarterback at a high level, why would I want to go there and have to play some of my games maybe in the snow? I mean, that's a possibility. I mean, there are way more attractive spots. I will say that. Back to the expanded playoff, I don't think it's a coincidence that the Big Ten is also property of Fox, basically. Mm-hmm. And Fox has no playoff games right now. But if there's an expanded playoff, that means more games. That means Fox gets a piece of the pie.
There's no question. It's all about money. And, of course, the SEC wants a 16-team playoff.
Well, they want what ESPN wants. And ESPN is fine with 12, says they'll take 14, no more than 16. And I'm good with 16. I like 12. I think 12's perfect. But
here's the thing. We went forever. I mean, I'm old enough to remember. God, I'm dating myself. I'm old enough to remember when 1 and 2 didn't even play. I remember prior to the bowl lines. I mean, I grew up.
Bowl coalition.
I remember when Auburn was ranked number 3, mm-hmm. and number 1 Nebraska lost, and number 2 Texas lost, and Auburn ends up number 3 after Miami jumps from number 5, and Nebraska dropped to 2. So, I've seen all. I mean, I'm old enough to remember that kind of thing. So now that you got a 12-team playoff, 16. I'm fine with 16. 24. I think you're watering it down. I think you're watering it down at 16. I think you're certainly watering it down at 24.
I'm going to date myself. I remember Georgia Tech and Virginia splitting a title. I think it was Georgia Tech and Virginia. There was like split titles for 2 straight years.
I think it was Georgia Tech and Colorado.
And then Virginia and somebody.
Was that not the 5th down game?
That was the 5th down against Missouri. I talked to one of their former running backs about that game, and he was laughing his head off. And I can't think of his name. I am showing my age, but that's it. Here's the thing. The biggest thing I pulled out of this ACC unanimously voting for a 2014 playoff. They'd be in support of that. The hypocrisy of it. Jim Phillips advocating for Notre Dame now, saying they should have been in. He's on record saying that this week at media days, spring meetings rather, after saying back in the fall that Miami needed to be the team. Tell me he's not trying to cater to those guys again. Notre Dame.
I'm sick of Notre Dame. I'm done with Notre Dame. I'm sick of Notre Dame.
I want to take a poll in some form or fashion, asking people who watch Notre Dame football, do you watch to see if they lose? I think, well, you're not alone. You're not alone. A lot of people do. And now they're trying to cater this expanded playoff where basically Notre Dame just has to finish in the top 12 anyhow, don't they, to get in? Then they get an automatic spot?
I believe so.
Don't get me started on that. And the optics of this 2014 playoff, I mean, coaches don't talk about winning championships anymore. They talk about making a playoff. That's what they talk about. They just want to get into the playoff.
Here's the thing, those guys. We're talking about making the playoff. Making the playoff's a big deal, right? Yeah. How many teams that make the playoff actually have a chance to win a championship?
It's changed. It has changed.
Well, that's true too. But back to our earlier topic, Ole Miss was one of those teams.
Yeah.
And the head coach walked out.
Yes, they did. It's not like it used to be, though, Ronnie, where you had 16 when we had a 14 playoff. You had 6 teams that were legitimate playoff contenders, but probably only 2, maybe 3 of them were legitimate national title contenders. That's changed. I think it's more broad now, but I agree with you. And we're going to throw this out there before we put a pin in this episode of Back Porch Sports. Lane Kiffin leaves Ole Miss before the playoffs to go to LSU, right? Who does he replace? Brian Kelly. What'd Brian Kelly do? Left Notre Dame when they were still in contention to make the 4-team playoff. It's so on brand. He left, Ronnie, by basically they sent a text message saying team meeting. And it was like 7 a.m. or something. He comes in, they time him, and he speaks for like 3 minutes, and he's gone. Brian Kelly. LSU likes that kind of individual, I guess. So.
Well, hey, look at the way LSU handled the firing of Brian Kelly and the governor, and he's going to let Donald Trump pick the coach, and I mean on and on and on. I mean, we're not going to spend a bunch of money on a coach, and we're going to have incentives. They got incentives, all right, but they also spent plenty of money. I mean, come on, give me a break.
Well, that's one of the things that the football coaches, or that the SCORE Act, and we'll talk about it next week if you want. The SCORE Act's being modified to where coaching salaries would come from a certain pot, buyouts would come completely from donations. So we might have some reform with regard to that. That's it for this episode of Back Porch Sports. Want to thank Kentucky football coach Will Stein for coming aboard the Duncan Assets Management Hotline. It was absolutely fantastic interview with him. You can watch all of our episodes on YouTube. Give us a like, give us a follow, subscribe, send us some comments, tell us what you think. Other than that, he's Ronnie Sanders. I'm Scott Hamilton. Thanks for stopping by Back Porch Sports, presented by Duck Club Bourbon.